When Breaking Bad was airing, there was one character who got more hate than almost anyone else: Skyler White. Online forums called her annoying, selfish, controlling. Fans turned her into the face of nagging wife stereotypes. But here's the truth nobody wanted to hear: Skyler was right all along. So let's break it down. From the very first season, audiences locked onto Walter White, a high school chemistry teacher with cancer, cooking meth to support his family. It was the ultimate underdog story. Walt was the man doing whatever it took. Fans rooted for him because he was the little guy fighting a cruel world. And then there was Skyler. She questioned him and doubted him. She stood in the way of his secret life. But what we forget is that Walter was not the hero. The show told us this from the start. Walt was lying, manipulating, and spiraling deeper into crime. Skyler was one of the only people calling him out, and that made her the villain in the eyes of an audience addicted to Walter's rise. Imagine this: your husband disappears at odd hours, hides his phone, makes secret money, and lies every time you ask him where he's been. You would panic and suspect cheating, maybe something darker. That's exactly what Skyler lived through. Walt didn't tell her about his cancer right away. He didn't tell her about the meth empire until he was deep in it, and even then, he only told her when he had no choice. Her nagging was just a basic survival instinct. She was trying to protect her kids, her home, her sanity. While audiences saw her as blocking Walt's success, she was really the only one protecting the family he claimed he was doing it all for. One of the strongest moments in the show is when Skyler says someone has to protect this family from the man who protects this family. That line is the heart of her story. Walt kept saying everything he did was for his wife and kids, but as the seasons went on, it was obvious that it wasn't about them anymore. It was about his ego, his pride, his need to be powerful. Skyler saw that. She realized Walt wasn't providing for the family, he was endangering them. By season 5, their house wasn't a safe home, it was a crime scene, and yet people still hated her for standing in Walt's way. Here's the ugly truth: a big reason Skyler got so much hate is because she was a woman challenging a male lead. Audiences are trained to accept violent, selfish men as complicated anti-heroes. Tony Soprano, Don Draper, Walter White, they can lie, cheat, kill, and still be loved. But when a woman resists or says no, she's painted as the problem. Skyler was judged harder than Walt, even though all she did was react to his lies and crimes. This double standard got so bad that Anna Gunn, the actress who played Skyler, wrote an essay about the real hate mail she received. People were attacking her as a woman. But when she realized how dangerous Walt had become, she got the kids out of the house. She chose their safety over his pride. Remember when she pushed Walt to buy the car wash? That was her attempt to launder money in a way that wouldn't get them arrested. She was cleaning up his mess, literally and legally. Moreover, Walt fooled almost everyone around him, including Jesse, Hank, even the cartel at times, but he could never fully fool Skyler. She saw the man behind the Heisenberg mask. However, Breaking Bad wasn't about a good man forced into crime. It was about a selfish man who chose crime because it made him feel alive. Skyler was the one pulling the curtain back on that lie. Every time she resisted Walt, she was pointing out the cost of his actions: the lives ruined, the kids put at risk, the home destroyed. She was the audience's moral compass. But because fans were addicted to Walt's power trip, they hated the person reminding them it was wrong. In the end, Skyler was one of the few characters who actually survived Walt's destruction, and she did it by refusing to fully play along with his empire. Now, revisiting Skyler White isn't just about defending one character, it's about how audiences treat women on screen. We cheer for male anti-heroes while demonizing the women who stand in their way. We confuse manipulation with charisma, and honesty with nagging. Skyler wasn't perfect. No character in Breaking Bad was, but she was right to question, right to resist, and right to protect her family from the man who claimed to be their savior. Now, if Skyler White was hated for standing up to a husband, Catelyn Stark was hated for something even deeper: being a mother who made hard choices. She didn't wear armor, she didn't swing a sword, and she wasn't as flashy as the other Starks, but in the eyes of fans, she was cold, bitter, and even blamed for some of the worst outcomes in the show. But the more you look back, the more it becomes clear: Catelyn Stark wasn't wrong. She was one of the few people who actually saw the dangers coming. The hate started early. Catelyn was cold toward Jon Snow, the supposed bastard son of Ned Stark. She didn't trust him. She didn't accept him. And for fans, this made her seem cruel and unfair. Later, people piled on when she released Jaime Lannister, which many blamed for weakening Robb Stark's war efforts. To a lot of viewers, Catelyn's actions looked like foolish emotional choices, but if you step back and look at her perspective, they weren't blind mistakes. They were the desperate moves of someone who knew exactly how dangerous the Game of Thrones really was. At her core, Catelyn was driven by one thing: her children's safety. Unlike Ned, who constantly played by honor and rules, Catelyn understood that Westeros didn't reward honor, it crushed it. From the very first season, she warned Ned not to go south to King's Landing. She saw how toxic the Lannisters were, and how quickly her family would be pulled into a fight they couldn't win. And what happened? Ned ignored her, stayed honorable, and got executed for it. Catelyn was right. One of the biggest reasons fans disliked her was how she treated Jon Snow. She never gave him warmth, never called him family. But think about her position. She thought Jon was her husband's son with another woman. She had to raise him in her house, right next to her own kids, as a living reminder of betrayal. At that point, it was harsh and it hurt Jon. But in a feudal world built on names, bloodlines, and inheritance, her coldness was survival instinct. She was protecting the rights of her trueborn children in a society where one slip could destroy their fortune. Her most controversial choice came when she freed Jaime Lannister. People screamed betrayal. How could she weaken Robb's war by letting their most valuable hostage walk? But look at her reasoning. Her daughters, Sansa and Arya, were captives in King's Landing. She traded Jaime not for power, not for politics, but for her children's lives. Was it risky? Absolutely. But for a mother who had already lost Ned and was watching her family crumble, it wasn't a reckless move. It was her only move. The tragedy is that her gamble didn't pay off because the Lannisters played dirtier than anyone expected. But her logic was sound. No throne, no victory, no war mattered more than her children's survival. What makes Catelyn so important is that she was the constant warning voice in a world full of blind pride. She told Robb to stay true to his vows. She told Ned not to trust the Lannisters. She begged leaders to put family above politics. Every time, she was dismissed as emotional or weak. And every time, her warnings turned out to be correct. Robb ignored her advice, married Talissa, and ended up slaughtered at the Red Wedding. The same Red Wedding that also claimed Catelyn herself, and she died because nobody listened. Catelyn Stark wasn't hated because she was wrong. She was hated because she broke the fantasy. Fans wanted the Starks to be heroes who could win through honor and glory, but Catelyn kept reminding everyone that Westeros didn't work like that. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't likable, but she was grounded in reality. She knew what the world was really like, and she fought with everything she had to keep her family alive. That doesn't make her cold. That makes her one of the few characters who actually understood the game. Looking back, Catelyn Stark was not a weak link. She was the glue trying to hold a doomed family together. Her coldness, her hard decisions, her desperate moves, they were survival tactics in a world designed to break people like her. But there's another type of character with the same pattern, only this time in animation. When Invincible dropped, one of the most talked about characters wasn't a hero, wasn't a villain, but a girlfriend, Amber Bennett. The internet turned on her fast. She was called selfish, annoying, and even toxic. But just like Skyler and Catelyn, if you strip away the fan bias, you realize something important. Amber was right. Fans of Invincible didn't just dislike Amber, they despised her. The biggest complaint came when she broke up with Mark, even after he revealed that he was invincible. People said she was ungrateful, that she should have instantly understood and forgiven him. To most people, Mark was the underdog hero. He was juggling high school, saving lives, and carrying the weight of Omni-Man's shadow. Amber was seen as the obstacle. She got in the way of his double life, and that made her an easy target for hate. But the problem wasn't Amber. The problem was how viewers were too locked into Mark's perspective to see hers. Put yourself in Amber's shoes. She's dating a guy who constantly disappears without explanation. He lies about where he's been, shows up late, flakes on promises, and hides a massive part of his life. From her point of view, that doesn't look heroic, it looks dishonest. Amber didn't know the full truth. All she saw was a boyfriend who didn't treat her with respect or honesty. And in the real world, most people wouldn't accept that. She had every right to call him out. When Mark finally reveals he's invincible, fans expect her to instantly change her mind. But think about it. If someone lied to you for months, would one confession erase all of that hurt? For Amber, the issue wasn't that Mark was a superhero. The issue was he never trusted her enough to tell her. Amber gets written off as nagging or demanding, but what she was really doing was standing up for herself. She refused to settle for half-truths and constant excuses. She knew her worth. She wasn't asking Mark to be perfect. She was asking for honesty and effort, and that's what made her different. Instead of blindly supporting the hero no matter what, Amber demanded accountability. Here's where the bias really shows. Fans are quick to forgive male characters for lying, cheating, or causing destruction. Omni-Man literally kills half a city, and fans still argue he's complicated. Mark hides the truth and constantly bails, and fans shrug because he's the hero. But when Amber refuses to accept lies and half-efforts, suddenly she's the villain of the relationship. That's the double standard. People expect women in these stories to quietly endure, to support the hero no matter what. Amber broke that mold, and the backlash showed how uncomfortable that made viewers. While others gave Mark endless passes, Amber didn't. She knew something was off and refused to ignore it. Mark thought keeping secrets would protect her. Amber knew that real trust only comes from truth. Instead of waiting around for Mark to change, she stepped away. That was self-respect, and Amber cared about how Mark treated her as a person, not about how many villains he fought. In the end, Amber wasn't hated because she was wrong. She was hated because she didn't fit the fantasy fans wanted. People wanted the perfect girlfriend who always understands, always waits, and never questions. Instead, Amber acted like a real person in a messy relationship. Her refusal to just accept Mark's lies wasn't ungrateful, it was necessary. She forced him to face the truth that being a superhero doesn't excuse being a bad partner. And that's why, if you watch closely, Amber wasn't the problem in the story. She was the reality check. So when people say Amber is one of the most hated characters in Invincible, remember, you hated her, but you were wrong. And even while characters like Amber demand honesty in relationships, hate doesn't just fall on girlfriends or mothers, it also hits best friends. One of the clearest examples is Gale Hawthorne from The Hunger Games. By the time the series ended, fans had completely turned on him. To many, Gale was jealous, harsh, even responsible for Prim's death. He became one of the most disliked characters in the story. But Gale wasn't wrong. From the start, Gale's problem was that he wasn't Peeta. Katniss' story was framed around her survival, and Peeta became the symbol of selfless love. Gale, on the other hand, was stubborn, angry, and ready to fight. Fans saw him as jealous of Katniss and Peeta's bond. They saw his strategies as cruel, and after the Capitol bombing that killed Prim, audiences pinned the blame on him. To many, Gale was the reason Katniss lost her sister. But was he really the villain fans made him out to be? Or was he the only one willing to face the truth of Panem's war? Gale didn't grow up wanting peace talks or symbolic gestures. He grew up in the coal mines, watching the Capitol crush his people year after year. He wasn't blinded by hope the way Katniss sometimes was. He saw the Capitol for what it was, brutal, manipulative, and unwilling to change without force. Where Katniss played the reluctant symbol of the rebellion, Gale was ready for open war. That difference made fans side with Katniss and see Gale as too extreme. But in reality, Gale wasn't extreme. He was practical. He knew survival under Snow's system was impossible. The biggest strike against Gale is the bombing of the Capitol's children during the final battle, the same strategy that ultimately killed Prim. People took this as proof that he had become cold, violent, and unworthy of Katniss. But let's look closer. Gale didn't drop the bombs. He worked on strategies with Beetee, but it was Coin who approved and executed them. Coin, the leader who Katniss herself would later kill for being manipulative and power-hungry. Gale was guilty of fighting a war, but he wasn't guilty of killing Prim. Blaming him for that is like blaming Katniss for every arrow she ever fired. It was Coin's ruthlessness. While others hesitated, Gale knew they would never surrender without real pressure. He was right that Snow's regime only collapsed through force. Also, where Katniss and Peeta became pawns in the arena and on TV, Gale wanted to break the system entirely. He wasn't interested in putting on a show. Gale's strategies were brutal, yes, but war is brutal. He wasn't celebrating violence, he was trying to end it quickly. Moreover, Gale never worshipped the rebellion's leaders the way others did. He saw that power was corrupting them too, and he wasn't wrong. The truth is, fans didn't just hate Gale for his strategies, they hated him because of the love triangle. Katniss chose Peeta, and once that choice was made, the story made Gale look like the bitter leftover. His anger, his distance, his hard choices, they were all filtered through the lens of Katniss' rejection. And because fans loved Katniss, they turned their frustration toward Gale. But remove the romance, and what's left? A boy who wanted freedom so badly he was willing to make hard decisions. In the end, Gale wasn't the villain of the Hunger Games. He was a realist. He wasn't gentle like Peeta, and he wasn't symbolic like Katniss. He was the one who carried the rage of District 12 and demanded more than survival. Did he lose Katniss? Yup. Did he make brutal choices? Yup. But none of that makes him wrong. It makes him the character who understood that revolutions aren't clean, and that freedom doesn't come without blood. Now, when we look back at these so-called hated characters like Skyler White, Catelyn Stark, Amber Bennett, and Gale Hawthorne, they all share one thing. They weren't wrong. They just broke the fantasy. They reminded us of the truth we didn't want to face, and that's why they're still arguing about it today, because sometimes the character you hated most was the one telling the truth all along.